budget hearing process for October 17th. Bring that to order. The record reflected is 9:10 in the morning, and that both Commissioner Cuney and Kearns are present as well as myself. And so with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Wallace.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, audience. Just a couple quick housekeeping points before we get started. Today is the day, yesterday was general governmental services, and you heard several presentations, and we did an overview for you. Today's focus is on law and justice services. And before we get started, I want to go through a couple points. We do have some water and coffee and snacks for the presenters that are right around into that room, so please help yourself. There is some seating up front for presenters. And of course, I think I've briefed folks on how to work the mouse to advance their presentations. Also, our budget coordinator, Tessa, is going to help us with some of the time. We want to make sure that all the presenters have an equal opportunity with the board. So we do have color cards. The green means that you're about 40 minutes into your time and you have 5 minutes left. This is both for your presentation and your question and answer session with the board. One minute when the yellow card goes up, and of course red means time's up. We will be keeping track in case other topics come up that are a very good conversation we want to follow up on. We will be keeping track of those, and we can schedule follow-up sessions with the Board of Commissioners at the time. But we do want to be respectful and make sure everybody has that equal opportunity with the board. We do have a couple breaks scheduled for this morning, as well as lunch. Something for all the presenters in case you are unaware, all of these will be recorded. These sessions and presentations will be recorded and put onto the internet for the public to watch and view. And then next week, we will have public comment. Okay? Any questions before we proceed? Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Larry Haskell.
Good morning, members of the board. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you about our budget today, and also to address the targeted budget cuts that we've been asked to make. So I want to thank you for that opportunity. I also like to thank Ms. Wallace for the assistance that her department has given us and guidance in terms of the formatting and everything that we should be doing here to make sure that this meets the standard. Also, I have a number of key members of my management team here that spent quite a number of hours in the process of putting this together, not only from the standpoint of meeting the monetary figures and calculating the staff positions that could be affected and the programs that will be affected and the collateral consequences of not providing those services to the public. But we spent a lot of time on it, so I wanted to introduce Greg Lundquist, my budget manager, Rachel Sterrett, District Court Supervisor, Julie Bowman, she's my executive assistant, John Grasso is the supervisor of the Combined Property Drug Unit, and of course Jim Amacio is my civil chief, and you probably have seen him around. I also want to point out to the board that I'm going to be referring at times to this document as well. It's a little bit more detailed than some of the overview slides. So as we kind of walk through that, when I get to those programs, if you want to pull that up, it'll give you a little bit more detail, and of course it may provide the basis for some questions that you may have. First of all, as you know, I'm approaching the end of my first term in office, and some of the things that I looked at doing when I came in actually bear on some of the discussion that we're having right here. I took a look at some of the supervisory positions that we had, and I felt that we could combine some of the functions, so I eliminated 2 supervisor positions. When I gave John Grasso the opportunity to supervise the property and drug unit previously, we had a supervisor for each of those. And I also put Mark Cipolla in charge of a combined gang and major crime unit because I felt that since they're prosecuting the same types of crimes under both, that Mr. Cipolla would handle that. I'd also point out that the supervisors are working supervisors, which means in most cases, they're also carrying caseloads as well. And I'll point out that your elected participates as well, because we have a number of serious cases ongoing, and when the other units are reaching their capacity, I want to make sure that I also fulfill a promise that I made that I would be involved. Jack Driscoll and I tried the Murray case, triple homicide, back late last year, and I also have 2 ongoing murder cases that I'm handling with co-counsel as we speak. In addition to that, we did, even before I took office, but after the election, we initiated the DWS-3 relicensing program. It took a while to get it off the ground, but it's been serving the public well. As a result of the kind of the combination of a couple of the units, I was able to free up another deputy prosecutor by combining units and eliminating 2 supervisory positions. And I recently put an additional felony level deputy prosecutor over in the DV unit to handle the increased DV load that is being generated over there by the aggressive efforts of the Spokane Police Department. I do want to point out that I know the board has a lot of decisions to make, and I can certainly appreciate the difficulty, and I'm not sure I'd want to trade places with you. But just point out that if you do add additional law enforcement, and that may be happening, I understand Spokane Police is going to add as many as a dozen officers, and the board may be inclined to give the sheriff additional deputies. Those persons in those positions are going to be out in the community. They're going to be making arrests, and they're going to be adding to the workload, not only of my office, but other agencies collaterally that have to deal with the new caseloads that will be generated by that. So with that, I want to now talk about the budget impact. First of all, I'd like to kind of refer to my letter that I wrote, and that is that we have a no-frills budget, and we don't have any extra staff. I move attorneys around where we need them most, but we've not returned to the levels that we had before the 2009 cuts. We're still several attorneys shy of that, as well as staff positions. So it's no frills and it's no extra staff. So anything that we do in terms of cuts in the prosecutor's office affects public safety. It's just a question of how much. So first, let's talk about how we're organized. This is a mission statement that we put together when I got into office. Protect the public, that's the primary job, by providing competent and ethical prosecution, superior victim service, and seeking justice in every case. There's our current organization. You'll see there are a number of supervisors. The chief criminal deputy is Jack Driscoll, and he's responsible for all of the areas that fall below him, which of course includes major crimes, the gang unit, which is combined felony traffic, special assault, property fraud, drug, domestic violence, juvenile. He also oversees the victim witness manager. We have 6 advocates, district court, and of course the appellate unit. Chief Civil, Jim Amacio, 9 attorneys, and of course we represent all the elected, including the Board of County Commissioners. We handle all the civil cases, the suits, the land use, anything that in terms of either defense or also prosecution of civil lawsuits from and against the county. Debbie Kurbitz runs family law. Pretty big unit, doesn't eat up any general fund money, however, because they're funded by the state. But they're a significant portion of what we do. You can see there's 7 lawyers over there, 9 paralegals, and a number of staff members, as well as a process server. Julie Bowman, executive assistant, 21 staff. Staff assistant over in the BCB. One of the reasons we have to have 2 supervisors for staff is because of the fact that we're not co-located. Very difficult for somebody to manage staff from several buildings away. So we have Alyssa Taylor over there that assists Julie, reports to Julie for the staff over in the property drug unit in the BCB. And then Greg's the business manager. Description of our services, more broken down. 70 lawyers, 63 support staff, 7 victim advocates. I can tell you that I just recently returned from a MacArthur Foundation meeting, and they emphasize the importance over there in the breakouts of victim advocates. And we're always scrambling, in part because of pay issues and opportunities elsewhere to keep our victim advocates. We're divided into 3 units generally. There they are. Criminal department, all criminal prosecutions across the board, all the courts. Civil department is the law firm for the county. They handle everything, like I said, including elected, appointed officials, as well as county departments. I spoke at the Spokane County Sheriff's Academy last night, and amazing the public does not understand the breadth of responsibility of the prosecuting attorney's office. They think of it just as prosecuting crimes. They have no idea, but they got a little education last night. Family law, as I said, they manage child support enforcement, paternity modifications, and bankruptcy cases. And again, under our auspices, but again, don't eat up any of the general fund money. They have a pretty healthy budget from the state. And revenue, this is where we get our operating money. 72%, as you can see, comes from the general fund. Get some contract revenue from the Valley, primarily for the contract for prosecution out there. State, federal, family law gets 20%. Fines and miscellaneous, 1%. How do we spend it? See, the felony prosecutions take up about 57% of what we spend. Misdemeanors, 7%. Civil, 10%. Mental health, 1%. DV, 3%. Family law, but again, funded from an outside source. Civil commitments are also 3%. So after the determination was made by the board to at least postpone the option of doing a levy lid lift, we were asked to provide some budget cuts to the tune of $673, actually $680,000 is what we came up with the proposals that we have. So program 1, we're looking at third-degree driving with license suspended. So here, when I had to consider this from a standpoint of priority, I took a look at, what is the impact on public safety directly of program changes or cuts. And since driving with license suspended, third degree is a misdemeanor, but there have been efforts in the state to decriminalize it, make it a civil infraction. They haven't made it through the legislature yet. And that may in fact occur at some point in time, but from the standpoint of public safety, if I'm rank ordering like DUIs and DVs and assaults and that sort of thing, this would be a program that would, again, though it affects public safety because there are collateral effects of this, this was a program that we looked at initially. So if we were to get the budget cuts that are proposed, we would basically be in a position where we wouldn't be able to prosecute standalone DWS thirds. My understanding is actually King County is already at that point. We would also have to end the diversion program into community relicensing. Now, you'll remember, though 2 of you, no, actually, I think only you, Commissioner French, were on the board when I came to the board and asked about this blueprint program. In the blueprint for reform, one of the things that the prosecutor was charged with implementing was the community relicensing program, similar to the one that the city has. So I came to you and I asked you for 2 positions and 2 attorney positions and a staff position to do that. And you looked at that very favorably and granted those positions, and they're new hire positions. And so if we end that program, and I'll talk about collateral consequences of that, be able to give you back lawyers. And again, it's spelled out in detail under Program 1, 2 attorney positions, 1 LOA 2, 1 paralegal position, and then an additional LOA 2 staff position. This would also reduce our ability to prosecute non-DUI, non-DV, non-sexual assault, and non-assault misdemeanors. So in turning to the District Court Supervisor, Ms. Starrett, who's here for any questions, I said, okay, let's prioritize what we do in District Court in terms of its impact, direct impact on public safety. These are the things that we felt were the highest priority. So everything else, like animal scraps, fish and wildlife, that sort of thing, theft threes, that sort of thing, are going to be filed for less frequently, and they're going to be looked at very carefully as to whether or not we can move forward. And I wouldn't say that we'll cease to do those, but I will say that they're going to get a different look now if we go through with the budget cuts as they're proposed. Obviously, these other crimes, DUI, DV, those will continue to be prosecuted at the current level. So there's, again, the staff positions that I talked about already. Collateral consequences. You know, one of the benefits of having the relicensing program is we get drivers legal again. We give them the opportunity to structure their payments, give them some time, and of course, if you have no license, you can't get insurance either. So our goal is to get them licensed so they can get insurance, and then of course they can drive, and the goal is to help them seek gainful employment and be able to get to and from their work location. So there's a lot of collateral consequences to not being able to do that, because people are going to drive anyway, and occasionally they're going to have accidents, and then there's economic consequences when you run into an uninsured driver who's at fault. Then we looked over into the property drug unit. Clearly, I'm not going to cut anything in major crimes, and I wasn't inclined to cut anything in the juvenile program either. So we looked over at property drugs, and we said, well, Mr. Grasso, what can we do there? So if these proposed budget cuts, and if you want to turn again to Program 2, no new referrals submitted to drug court. Drug court takes a dedicated prosecutor that I can pull off, and I can put them prosecuting other things. Same thing with the early case resolution. We dedicate our prosecutor to that too. Actually, it's the same one that usually does drug court and ECR. Then I took a look at this, and again, looking at current trends and the impact on public safety. And I'm not saying it doesn't impact public safety, because wait till I start talking about collateral consequences of not prosecuting drug offenses, but a limited prosecution of straight up PCSs. So what that means is if you're in possession of non-dealing, just personal use amounts of drugs, we would look at more limited prosecution of that. And we'd have to do some of them on a case-by-case basis, because even within a given category, there are some facts that'll jump out at you that would say, this is a case we really ought to prosecute versus some other. Again, there has been another factor in my decision making on this was there have been movements in the legislature to make all possessory drug crimes misdemeanors. And I believe the Oregon State Legislature has already done that. I don't know if that's going to happen in Washington. There's also been a proposal to make them unranked felonies, if felonies at all. So to meet the target here, and first of all, let me go back and quote the amount. In Program 1, it's $323,000 saved. And in this Program 2 here, so if we reduce 2 staff attorney positions, 1 legal secretary, and a half a paralegal, estimated monetary reduction is $350,000. So well, let me back up. So let's talk about collateral consequences of no drug court. or at least no new referrals. So drug court, as you know, gives people that have high risk, high needs an opportunity to get some treatment, get some help. It's a 1-year, pretty intensive program. There's a lot of requirements. There's a very strict protocol. It takes time, it takes money, it takes a dedicated prosecutor. We don't have that. We're going to have an increased drug problem in the community. Increased drug problems lead to increased property crimes. We all know that. There's a lot of data that supports that. And then it just fuels each other. So more property, more drugs, more property, more drugs. We're already in a bind in the state with property crime being #1 on many polls recently. And Spokane in particular has a significant vehicle theft, prowl, and that sort of problem. So this I would expect to see get worse if we don't treat drug offenders. If we don't prosecute drug offenders, then we can't get them any treatment either. It's same thing in juvenile. If you don't charge them, you can't get them services. If you don't charge a drug offender, you can't get them into any services. So there's going to be collateral consequences to that, and it will increase the workload of the remaining deputies because they're going to prosecute more property crimes. Program 3, County Public Records. This input was primarily in discussions with Jim Amacio and my staff. So currently each agency is charged with having a public records officer, and for our part, we would propose passing the responsibility of receiving and forwarding public records requests to the board or to other county departments. And by doing that, it's not a huge savings, but we would reclassify our current public records specialist to a paralegal 2, resulting in a pay reduction actually for that position. And it's a $9,000 estimated monetary reduction. The obvious collateral effect of that is someone else is going to have to pick up that responsibility. We have to have it. In fact, quite frankly, I think that the public records requests and the responsibilities are going to increase. Particularly, I just got back yesterday, another little travel that I had over to Ellensburg. I'm on the legislator body camera task force, and the public records requests will soar as a result of the increasing use and availability and interest in redacted or unredacted, and that fight remains to be seen as well, but over these videos. So the board also asked us to provide information on some supplemental requests. So we staffed this as well. Obviously, what we would like to do of all the programming, if I could restore anything or not cut it at all, we would want to continue to add cases into drug court and early case resolution, and we want to be able to prosecute drug offenders, if for no other reason than to get them into a program that's going to prevent them from becoming chronic offenders. Because as we all know, the data supports the notion that property offenders are committing 8 or 9 crimes before they even get caught on one. The obvious effect there. Caseload is very important. We don't have caseload standards as prosecutors, but I can tell you that we prosecute every case that comes in that meets the evidentiary standards. 994A 411 directs that if the evidentiary standards are met, that those cases will be filed. We don't have an outside agency to help us. We are ourselves. But our caseloads are very high, and if we can keep the staffing at what it is, and mindful of the fact that we've never recovered from the 2009 layoffs, even to this day, trying to keep these caseloads appropriate. These people are working very hard for you. They're working very hard for our public. And the fewer of them we have, not only do we have to look more closely at what we can prosecute and maybe give better plea bargains, and that's already a sore subject with many people in the public, But if they're going to go to trial, they have to have the time to prepare.
I just clarify. So in this supplemental request, is this assuming that the cut has already been taken and you want to add this back, or is
Correct.
this okay?
Or if this is what I can do if this particular program isn't cut.
Okay, thank
But
you.
this would be our supplemental number one request. If the board, Commissioner Cuney, if the board were to give us some of the money back that was targeted, this would be the first place I would use it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Drug rehabilitation, very important. Staff retained be one prosecutor, one legal secretary position, and a half a paralegal. So kind of reverse order, so now we're back to the D3 program. If we were to get enough money to satisfy supplemental request number one, supplemental request number two would be to be able to continue, money to be able to continue with the D3 programs. Maintain the diversion program and community licensing. I actually got a call from the current city attorney, Mike Ormsby, and he said he's just getting a flood of people contacting him, asking Larry to change his mind. I said, Larry didn't decide that this was the thing to do. This is something that we would be having to do if we lost the money. So I assured Mike Ormsby that we are very much in favor of continuing the relicensing program, and we would suspend it only if the money wasn't available to put the prosecutors on the job. Obviously, we want more licensed drivers for the reasons already stated, and we would continue participation in the relicensing program. Staff retained, again, back to just what we would have been losing, 2 deputy prosecutor positions, 2 legal office assistant positions, and a paralegal. That's what it takes on our side to run the program. There's also been, and I can't quantify it for you because I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I know that due to caseload standards with public defenders, there's been a savings of additional public defenders while we've been doing this relicensing program because they don't have to carry those caseloads. And supplemental request number 3 is off from the impacts, but it's very important. And as you know, the prosecutor's office, forever so far, has been paying the bill out of our budget from the general fund every year for cost of interpreters. And this statement here is true. So when county departments incur unexpected interpreter costs, they land in our lap, and they've been going up. I think as much as $90,000. We're at 85 or so right now. So if the board would see fit, we'd request that this line item either reflect actual costs of the fees billed to our office by other county departments, allow funds to be used where intended instead of used for other county departments. And we actually do juggling to make that happen. So I'd like to see that realigned. The monetary impact, again, it's gone up quite a bit. This is our estimate, but we're pretty high right now. And supplemental request number 4, public records, and again, that gets back on track with the impact statements here, restoring that. And again, it's a small amount of money, but the countywide public records specialist would be retained. Okay, so another thing that the budget office asked to do was talk about the future, what we'd like to see in the next year, what we would like to see in 5 years. So I know it's negotiation time, but we have huge retention issues, particularly in staff. As the mandatory minimum wage goes up in the state, as the economy gets healthier, other employment opportunities crop up, and quite frankly, we lose people sometimes from the time we call them to come in for an interview and when they get there. Or they're in the door with a foot out of the door. Or we keep them 6 months and then they're gone. I know one of the guiding principles of the board was we would address salary issues, hourly wages, when retention and recruitment become a problem. I do not believe I'll be the only department head standing before you saying we have that problem. That's one thing that we would hope that could be addressed. We also like to see the creation of a public records unit in civil and funding therefor to consist of one full-time deputy prosecutor and one staff position. And again, this comes, in my view, from the notion of public records requests are just going to go up. They're not going to go down. And again, as the ability to produce these other electronic pieces of information increases, and again with the body-worn cameras alone, on top of what we deal with every day, this actually makes a lot of sense when the money's available. I talked with Mr. Krasminski about this last week, about the fact that we were going to propose to the board that we have a technical unit in the criminal division, and funding consists of 4 to 5 FTEs to manage technological advances, including body-worn cameras, redaction, transcription, electronic discovery process. They're overwhelmed, and it's about licensing for one thing. It's about technical knowledge, and the law is still kind of evolving in the area of the body-worn cameras and what the legislature is going to do. There's a report due from the task force to the legislature by 1 December, and they're going to wrestle with this. But this function is going to grow, and so and we're dealing. Julie Bowman attends many meetings with the electronic discovery. We've had a lot of issues with electronic discovery. I'm waiting for that big, ugly, nasty case that gets dismissed for governmental misconduct having to do with late or lack of discovery. And I can tell you that in my perspective, all the efforts that we've had with all the different programs that don't talk to one another, pulling discovery is very difficult. At some point in time, we're going to have people in the office that are dedicated to that, not to mention the redaction of the videos, that you need expertise, and the law requires that you use the most economically feasible way that you can to do that. And there'll be more detail given to us by the state legislature before too long. Funding for other prosecutors' office or IT technical advantage as well. Surface Pros for all deputy prosecutors. 5 years. We're hoping that at some point in time we're going to be able to get staff levels back. Our felony filings are flat. They're about where they've been. I've watched emails go back and forth from other electeds about how they're having an unexpected rise in their felony filings, but we're pretty much where we have been for the last year or two. But we'd eventually like to get up there. We're working people pretty hard, and I sometimes think if I had 5 more attorneys, oh my gosh, what I couldn't do with 5 lawyers to round out these units. But we make do with what we have. But in the next 5 years, I sure would like to see that addressed. We'll be supporting legislation, as I know all of you are, to better apportion the cost of the criminal justice system between state and county. That's a huge issue. I am preaching to the choir here. But rest assured that I'm involved in that as well, and I'm pushing as hard as I can because I understand the dynamics and the structural gap that occurs because of the fact that we're not able to fill that gap with the revenues that we can generate under current law. My dream. It's been the dream. Hey, if we get anywhere near the top few, I'll be happy. But ultimately, if we could move into one building, it would allow me actually to cut more supervisory positions because it's out a little bit easier too.
Were you contemplating moving everybody over into Jim's building?
Well, if Jim comes up with that floor plan, I'm ready to go.
Double bunk you, Chairman.
So, in summary, again, I recognize you got a tough job. we all got tough jobs here, but like I said, yours is tough enough at this point in time where I'd rather keep mine than do yours. So I recognize you have a very difficult task, a very difficult decision to make, and that you have many, many competing priorities. But I can guarantee you that my office is able, willing, cooperative, and we will serve the public to the best we can with the resources that you give us. I want you to know that you don't have any more dedicated employees. The goal of the collective community safety and observing the statutory responsibilities that we're charged with in the prosecutor's office and the staff that I have right now. And other than that, I'm ready for any questions or any of my staff.
Questions from your fellow commissioners? All right.
Thank you very much.
Very thorough presentation.
Thank you, Liv. Okay, so
Get
now
this ready?
our technical folks are asking